So welcome to this week's Optimum Health Clinic Facebook Live. And it's the first Facebook Live in a while. This is the first Facebook Live since the Fatigue Super Conference. And I think for understandable reasons, I became a bit allergic to the idea of doing any kinds of videos for a few weeks afterwards. I think if people realize it was an enormously ambitious project that ultimately was phenomenally successful. And I'm very, very grateful for all the positive feedback that we've received from people. We managed to collect most of that in a Google Doc of emails and messages on social media, people thanking us. And it's over 30 pages long, and it really is appreciated. So thank you very much. We had, I think, 42,500 people registered for the conference in the end. So we managed to reach a lot of people in a lot of different countries with a lot of different perspectives. And I think it was a great way of spreading really some of the core messages of the Optimum Health Clinic approach. So yeah, it was a big milestone, and it's nice to be back, starting to do some videos again. And yeah, just really grateful to be on the other side, but also grateful that it was as successful as it was. But it also gave me an idea for the title of this first Facebook Live since, which is dealing with overwhelm. I think if there was one criticism of the conference, it was that there was so much information packed into the 8 days of the event. And I know a number of people bought the recordings and online access, which is great. But it got me thinking about just overwhelm generally. And also, as I was putting together this conference over the 4 or 5 months leading up to it, some of the strategies that I was using to manage my own, at times, overwhelm with the kind of enormity of the project. So just to share a few of the kind of tips and suggestions that I personally find helpful, but I think also can be very helpful for people on the recovery journey, which find themselves at different points in different ways feeling overwhelmed. So the first thing is really recognizing what is happening. Sometimes we don't identify that we are in overwhelm. And so what happens is our achiever patterns are kind of pushing steps in, and we just kind of force ourselves to kind of keep on going in a way which is energy draining, unsupportive. It's not self-loving, self-caring, and ultimately it's not helpful and effective. And so if we can recognize and identify and say to ourselves, and right now I'm in overwhelm, and I need to address the fact I'm in overwhelm before just kind of pushing forwards and trying to kind of forge ahead. Once we recognize we're in overwhelm, often apart from obviously taking some time to rest, if that's what we need to do, we need to chunk down whatever it is that we're trying to deal with into smaller, more manageable steps. So normally overwhelm, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One step at a time, one mouthful at a time. That we need to break it down into smaller enough mouthfuls to chew on, or kind of pieces to manage, that it then becomes possible. So for example, I'm working on a book project at the moment, and you don't sit down and write a book. You sit down and you try and figure out the kind of contents and the kind of structure things you want to cover. And then you go to each chapter and you figure out, well, what's going to go there, and you do it a step at a time. There's no moment that you sit down and you write a book. There's just lots of moments that you sit down and you do bits of it and you gradually kind of put it together. And the more manageable you make those chunks, the more achievable it then becomes. So we need to recognize, we need to chunk to smaller steps. We then need to create a bit more time potentially. Often the overwhelm is not just the amount that we're trying to do, but it's the amount of time in which we're trying to do it. And so, for example, if that's on the recovery process, and let's say, we need to deal with something, some kind of admin thing, or we need to deal with a life situation, we're putting all this pressure on ourselves that this has to happen like today, and it feels too much. In fact, a good example of this is that we're doing some refurbishment of one of the office units here at the Optimum Health Clinic, and we're repainting and recarpeting, and we needed to find a window of time where we could move from this unit down to the other unit where the training center is. so we could give space to the decorators. And the challenge is then finding that window of time where the training center is free. And this window we had was like less than a month away. And I came in this morning and I could see that the admin team was really stressed because people were going on holiday. There was also a broken down printer and various things. And really the resolution was we needed more time. And so we then found the window of time in November, which, you know, it's not ideal, but it then means that everyone's not stressed in the process. So we recognize what's happening. We chunk to smaller manageable steps. We need to create more time, potentially. We then need to decide what the priorities are and what is most important. Sometimes when we're in overwhelm, we're making more things seem important than necessarily are important. So it might be, let's say that you bought the recordings to the Fatigue Super Conference, and now you're overwhelming yourself. I've got to watch all of the sessions, read all of the transcripts, and then you feel overwhelmed because of the amount of time that feels. It might be that just giving yourself more time is helpful, but also kind of going, well, actually, maybe I haven't got to go through all 70 hours of the conference. Maybe I just want to focus on the sessions that feel more appealing to me. Or, you know, my preparation of the conference, it was like, what are the sessions that feel really important, not what's everything that we could do that would create a, you know, rather than being 70 hours, 200 or 300 hours of content. The next thing is celebrating victories along the way. So also one of the ways that we get overwhelmed is we try and do too much too quickly. We don't break it into chunks, we don't prioritize, but also then we achieve something along the way. And in that achievement, what should happen is there's a sense of relief, like our system kind of feels, oh, God, wow, I've achieved that. It's a victory. That's really great. And we kind of enjoy and bask in that moment, which then is replenishing and rejuvenating, which then gives us the resources to come to the next step. If we don't celebrate along the way, then we're just endlessly kind of causing stress by the fact that we're always trying to achieve the next bit, but we're overwhelmed and we're not having that space and kind of breathing time along the way. If we can celebrate, if we can acknowledge ourselves, then it's not just about being nice to ourselves, although that's obviously a good thing. It also has a soothing, healing impact, which gives us more capacity towards what it is that we're trying to do. And the final thing is to just kind of as a part two of that point is to take the pressure off and be kind to ourselves. If our inner critic's kind of putting loads of pressure and beating up on us, getting some space, getting some distance from that can be really helpful as well. So to summarize, recognize what is happening, that you're in overwhelm, chunk to smaller steps and get more time, decide what the priorities are of what really is important and what perhaps you're just telling yourself is important, celebrate the victories along the way, and then take pressure off and be kind to yourself in the process. So I hope that's been useful. As a kind of part two to this blog, something else I wanted to put out there. That actually, as I've been reflecting on the amount of content that was created by the conference, actually the amount of content, this is 101, so we've done 100 Facebook Lives up until this point. For those of you that have followed the other side of my entrepreneurial life with Conscious Life, there's about 400 hours of video workshops that are on there. But I am keen to find a way to help better surface and help people discover some of the content that's being created through that, to kind of try and effectively chunk that down, prioritize, and give a bit more time and kind of journey to that. So I'm working on a plan of putting out a kind of daily series of 5 to 10 minute chunks of inspiration that may be excerpts from the conference, excerpts from Conscious Life, excerpts possibly from Secrets of Recovery, some new pieces like this. And one of the things I want to also do with that, which is a little bit of an experiment, is I'm interested in filming some interactions between myself and some of you guys, our community. These won't be necessarily full-blown sessions, although that is something that I may also explore doing in the time, filming some sessions that we can share with the community. But I wanted to take some specific, what would almost be pieces of sessions, like a theme or a topic or really a question that you might have that we could explore together for anything from probably 5 minutes to might be up to 30 minutes around a particular issue you might be grappling with. And that might be something like, you're really struggling to find your baseline and with pacing. You're just not quite sure where your level is, and kind of you keep crashing doing too much too quickly. Or it might be that you've been doing a lot of things to try and calm maladaptive stress response, and it just isn't really working. You're wondering why that might be. Or it could be you have a really big helper pattern and you're struggling with boundaries and you're not being very successful at putting those in place. But many, many examples I could give. But kind of pieces that we can have a bit of a dialogue, and I would play a therapeutic role, but it would be on a contained piece of an issue as opposed to a whole kind of resolution. So you'd need to either be in some kind of ongoing therapeutic work or be self-managing enough that you're comfortable to do a piece of work without having necessarily holding for the kind of ongoing kind of work. Obviously, we'd be filming these. We do it via FaceTime or Zoom or Skype or something like that. So you'd have to be comfortable with filming. You don't have to use your full name. In fact, you could use a pseudonym. You could change the name if you want, but we wouldn't use your full name. So if you were using your first name, someone wouldn't be able to go on kind of Google or YouTube and search your name and find a clip. So we'd have a level of kind of anonymity in there. But as I say, you would have to be comfortable with it being filmed. It wouldn't be live, at least not for the time being. Maybe down the line that might be interesting, but we'd pre-film it. And then if there was a particular, if you said, your partner's name and you thought, actually, I wish I hadn't said their name, and then we could bleep that out. Or if there was something specific that was really personal, you wanted to chop it out within reason, we could do that. So there would be a container around it. It wouldn't be just immediately broadcast live. But obviously what I don't want to do is film stuff and go, you can't put the whole thing out, because it kind of defeats the object of the energy exchange of you sharing your process, but not paying for that time we'd have together. But then we can share that with a wider audience. It is an experiment. So I think what I'll do is film probably half a dozen of these kind of short interactions, and then see how they are. We'll release some of them and see what the feedback is. So it might be no one's interested, and it might be lots of people are interested, in which case we'll just kind of pick the ones that seem like the best fit initially. So if you're interested in doing that, please email Jenny at theoptimumhealthclinic.com. Jenny looks after our social media, our newsletter, some of our customer support, was customer support on the conference, and she'll liaise with me to kind of figure out some times. And there's no particular time slot. I've got various points in the week that I can schedule some time to do this. But I think my hope is it will be a really interesting way to bring to life some of this teaching of some of these ideas. So rather than it just being like this video was, me theoretically kind of talking to you guys, it would just be a bit more interactive and a bit more real in a sense, which I think could be really interesting. I think that was it. So as I say, please email Jenny at theoptimumhealthclinic.com. I guess you could also put something in the comments here. Jenny keeps an eye on these, so she could also respond via that. And yeah, in terms of these Facebook Lives, my plan is, as you probably got the sense, to evolve this format. So I may or may not do another one or two of these, but then we'll gradually transition to this new format, and you'll hear all about that via our newsletter and social media in the usual places. But thanks for watching. I hope that's been interesting and helpful, and I will talk with you guys again soon.